Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about the 1.5 meter factory with a ready-to-use solution. My name is Raymond Johnson. I'm a Sales and Operation Manager at Axians. And in this webinar, we'll take you along in the world of industrial social distancing and where it could fit in your organization. In this area, we work together with Kinexon, well known for their solution in tracking of assets, for instance, in sport, but a lot of in industry. Veronica Bauer of Kinexon will take us along in the solution specific for organizations to safeguard the 1.5 meter distance. And Veronica will introduce herself a bit. Sorry for the noise. Maybe some general notes up front. We really encourage you all, the people joining, to ask questions during the webinar. You could post them in the question or in the chat box. We will try to answer them directly if possible, but we will surely address them by the end of the webinar, the latest. We will record this webinar. You will all get a link to the recording afterwards, so feel free to share it with any of your colleagues or other people. When you ask questions, your name will not be mentioned during the webinar, so really don't hesitate to ask any questions. It will be anonymous. I think it will take about 30 minutes approximately, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more, depends on the questions as well. Just to show you a little bit of who we are for the people joining that do not know Axians. We are an ICT technology company specialized on digitalization and renewing energy solutions. And we really work to customers to create a better life for people, for residents, for consumers looking for a better experience, for teachers and students who achieve inspiring results, and for patients who expect better care. And we really try to keep the industry and the business running and to ensure people worldwide keep moving and communicating. In short, it's about impact that we have on people's lives. And we do that, we feel, via very inspiring work that we do for our customers. So as we like to say in our promise, it's the best of ICT with a human touch. So this is all about what I'm going to say about our company. I'm really happy to give the floor to Veronica. So we'll switch to her presentation. And Veronica, thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is all yours.
All right, thanks Raymond for the presentation. Let's see, I'll switch to mine. Hold on a second. Okay, I just have to switch briefly. Hold on.
It's okay.
It's always nice because, of course, as you can imagine, we practiced this before and then it worked just fine. And now it's
there you go.
taking some time. All right, so thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to show you how you can use the digital measurement to help your employees stay safe during those uncertain times. It's a product that we call Kinexon SafeZone, and we're just celebrating about 6 months of that product, and it has received overwhelming media success, overwhelming success all over the globe almost, I have to say. So not only if we measure it by the immense media coverage and attention we've received over the past 6 months, you see here some major German media outlets, but also some international coverage stories, such as we were on CNN on a show, on CNBC, on several international technology media outlets, on the Financial Times, but also a huge success measured by the number and by the names of the clients we have convinced so far of this solution and of the value it provides to customers. So those references you see are just a few of the customers we have here across Europe. In total, over 80 clients already use the solution to save and secure their operations and to make sure that employees stay safe during such a pandemic time. 6 months, this might sound a bit surreal to you. Of course, we did not have a product like Kinexon SafeZone up in our drawers ready to release it to the market. But of course, we as a company have been dealing with the technology and with localization and proximity solutions for quite some time. We are a German-based company, as I think Raymond already mentioned, and we have used a radio frequency technology, ultra wideband, in two main scenarios. One is in sports performance tracking for indoor sports. So it relies a lot on the precision of measuring the distance from one athlete to another, and on the shop floor for tracing assets and materials throughout the production process. And with the experience of deploying and developing this technology in different surroundings for different purposes, we were able to adapt it pretty quickly to this new purpose of helping people. It's actually not targeted only at employees, but people in general, to keep the right distance, to warn them if they step too close, and later on help to trace the critical contacts that we had. Now that I talked a little bit about the background, it would be interesting to get to know you a little bit more. And don't worry, it's not a deep survey, but just a quick poll that we would like to ask you, if you don't mind. And as Raymond mentioned, it's anonymous, but it would be interesting for us to see if you as a company have considered using a digital technology to enforce social distancing measures and to do contact tracing in your own company. So just a brief interest from my side if that has been up. So please, if you just answer that. I don't know if we have a result already because I can't see it.
Still, I think we're still in the process of getting the results all collected. Oh, it was a 100% yes, Veronica.
Yes, wow, okay, that's pretty
100%.
amazing. And I think it shows how mature, I mean, how this market has changed in the past, let's say, 4 months, because I'm pretty sure if we'd done this survey 4 months ago, nobody would have thought about it. And then the second one, and please just, if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, but it would just be interesting for us to see, have you had actually to deal with contact tracing because you had a positive COVID-19 case in your business? I don't want to expose anyone. We won't share that information, who it was, just curious for us to see how many actually had to have that problem.
We're just waiting for the poll to show.
Okay, I don't see the poll. I don't know if this worked.
No.
Well, otherwise, I think
we just proceed with the presentation. Sorry for that.
All right. Okay. So I can talk a lot about our product, but of course, it's also nice if you have some reference customers talking about it. And I would like to share a brief video with you that is from one of our major reference customers, the NFL, the National Football League in the US, who have been a SafeZone client for 3 months now, and they have just released this video. So let me start it.
As the NFL faces the unprecedented challenge of playing a season amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Contact tracing is a key piece of the league's protocols to mitigate the spread of the virus.
Contact tracing is something that's really hard to do. Normally it requires on patients recall. You ask someone, hey, in the previous 2 days, who were you around? How long were you around them? And at what distance were they? And so that's notoriously inaccurate information.
When we identify a case or a potential exposure, we want to very quickly identify how many people may have been involved in that exposure so that we can then put those people in isolation, perhaps test those people as well.
The NFL has found a more efficient, accurate, high-tech solution that brings precision to the contact tracing process.
Through our tracing, we can find out whether they've had contact that might increase the risk for somebody else.
The NFL has always made sure that we use the latest and greatest of technology really in anything we do, but certainly something as important as keeping our players safe and personnel safe during this COVID-19 time, it could not be done without technology. The technology for our implementation of contact tracing is really using something that's called a proximity recording device. It's a small chip that just works by sending out a radio frequency to record the distance and duration that you're actually in contact with another individual.
It's technology that's been adopted league-wide.
The contact tracing devices are worn by every player, coach, and staff member every day. They pick them up when they come in the facility. They take them off when they leave in the evening. And so whether they're in meetings or practice or weight training or medical care, whatever they're doing, they have those on.
We're working with our players real close to find out what works for them. Right now, at this point in time, the wristband has worked. We're a month in, and whatever the new normal is, this is part of it.
The new normal also means not getting complacent. The devices add rigor to the implementation of the league's COVID protocols.
It allows the teams every day to get a report of how they did the previous day with their physical distancing. So they can go back in and look and see if there were areas where people were not doing a good job staying apart, and they can either change their routines or change their facility or make sure that they're reminding people what they need to do with regard to physical distancing. So we think these devices are going to prove incredibly useful to us throughout the season.
So I think that was a pretty nice video explaining how they use it. It's actually interesting because they really have used it league-wide. So they have distributed to every single team. And it's part of the whole concept that they have shared with the US government to get approval to restart the league again. But of course, I think he also mentioned a few things that I want to get straight later on, because what we can't do is actually say where the contacts took place. So what he mentioned about adjusting the measures is additional concept that they haven't used with our technology. Sorry?
No, please proceed.
Okay. Full screen. Is it full screen now? I think it is, hopefully. The video?
Yes.
All right. So, okay. So let's dive deeper into what the solution does and how it works. So at the core of the solution is something that we call the Kinexon Safe Tag. It's a smart wearable based on ultra-wideband technology. You can see it here in those pictures that every employee has to wear. Ultra-wideband UWB offers very high precision, above about 10 centimeter accuracy, which is one of the main differentiations to other technologies such as BLE. And apart from that sensor and its charging pads, you don't need any infrastructure to use the solution in its basic functionality, which is the warning functionality to keep the necessary distance. There are two options available for this product. The basic one that warns every employee who wears a safe tag if the recommended minimum distance is not kept is what we call the basic variant. So the sensor sends and receives signals from other safe tags in its surroundings and can determine by the time it takes to receive the signal, so the time of flight method, how far away the other sensor is. And then there are different warning signals possible to alert the employees. Basically, it's a visual or an acoustic signal that you can choose from. All those alarms can be adjusted and configured to the client's needs. So you can have different options, different warning steps as well. So, first just a visual one, and then the closer the employee gets, also an acoustic one. I'll explain it a little bit more on the next slide. And then there is the second option, as we call the extended version of the product, which has the additional component to it that it uses a so-called exposure management app. So this is where you can trace the critical contacts. So how is this possible? The safe tags, which all have unique IDs assigned to one another, stores any encounter with other safe tags. So what does it mean? It stores the tag ID of the other sensor, duration, and the distance of the encounter. And this is all later transmitted into the software. So let's have again a look at the different warning options and how you, for example, can set up a different step-by-step alarm. So on the left-hand side, you see that the employee takes Kinexon safe tag out of the charging cradle at start of the work, and the sensor is just ready to be used and activated once it leaves the charging cradle. So the distance between the sensors is measured in real time always. It measures up to 25 meters, just about. And so if a colleague is nearby, but there is no critical distance, so for example, over 1.50 meters, there is, for example, an LED that flashes green. But as soon as this colleague steps closer under this 1.5 meter distance, this LED flashes in a warning red, or it flashes at a higher frequency. And only after a certain time threshold, as a third step of warning the employee, there would be an acoustic signal that goes off. Why does that make sense in our opinion, or why is this something that we recommend? It's because people don't get annoyed if they pass somebody on the hallway very briefly, that there's always an acoustic sound going off, because you have to also make sure that the system is adopted and accepted by employees. And I think, therefore, you need to think about the situations that can occur, and so people will actually keep on wearing it and don't leave it only at the desks. I talked about the high flexibility and configurability of the system. So, for example, we also have those zoning options. You can manage different zones within your company. Whether you prefer a permanent alarm or a rest zone, you can program the tags accordingly. For example, this means you may want to deactivate the alarm in certain areas where there is sufficient other types of protection, such as plexiglass. There are certain steps where it's, for example, necessary that that people step closer to one another, and it's always the same people. So you can set up one of those tags as a zoning tag that deactivates the alarm. However, for example, if we talk about the contact tracing, the tracing function is not disabled. And the zone, as you see here, is defined by the radius that you can define to set up around the sensor to set this up. And there's also the option to have a separate single charging unit, so those sensors can be permanently installed at those zones and don't need to be changed on a regular basis because the battery is empty. So I mentioned one part is the warning, but the other part is the contact tracing. And we do see a little bit of a mindset shift. A few months ago, most of the companies who approached us, they wanted to use the product mainly for the warning functionality, so that the employees would really get the awareness they needed to keep the distance, to stay safe. But now that the first companies had to deal with the first positive cases amongst their employees, they actually really come to us because they want to use the contact tracing functionality. So how does it actually work, and how is the data then transferred? So here is a schematic view on the system. So once the employee puts his safe tag back into the charging unit, this charging unit needs to be connected to what we call a readout station. It's basically a laptop. And then either this laptop or in the network, that there is an exposure management app that collects and stores this data and analyzes it. and then only a trusted person has access to that data. How is this possible? It's possible because we have different roles in the system already. So there's a user role, there's an administrator role, and then there's also this role for the trusted person that can access that data. In order to make use of contact tracing, I need to be able to identify which employee used which safe tag. So there needs to be a certain pairing between employee ID and the safe tag at some point. And I mentioned, I think at the beginning, that data protection is very critical, and it has been taken into consideration while designing this product from the beginning. So what are some of the steps that we have taken to make sure that it's data or GDPR compliant? We only collect minimal data. We store that data at customer servers or at this readout station, not our own. We don't load it up into the cloud. We protect the access to that data by different rules that we have in place at the software. And we recommend, and that's normally the case, that there's only pseudonymized data stored. Pseudonymized in that way that we recommend not to use the real names in the system, but certain codes to identify the employers, such as QR code cards, for example, and keep a separate list where those codes and the real names match. Then there are still two ways to pair the employee and the safe tag. Of course, there's one that you just simply assign one safe tag to each employee. So it's a static assignment, and the employee takes out the same safe tag every morning that he comes to work. And then there's the second option of a dynamic assignment via a QR code scanning. So the employee first scans a QR code that has been assigned to him by the company, and then the safe tag. And then this information is coupled until another person uses it or scans his QR code and the safe tag. And so once the safe tag is being put back into the charging unit, the relevant data is transmitted and it's free to be used again. Here we have summarized the most important points again, because GDPR compliance is one of the major topics we talk about to all of our clients. And no worries, most of our clients have gotten it approved by working councils and through their experts. But I just wanted to mention a few more things so you take this away from the webinar. So if you use the warning functionality only, of course, it's easy because basically there is no data stored at all. So there is no direct link between a person and the sensor because you don't need to assign it to somebody. And then there is no data stored at all in the system. That's just a firmware thing that we have firmware updated, so there is no collection and no transmitting of the data. And then I think the most important point about the tracing is that we cannot determine where a contact has taken place. So it's not a collection of movement or of position data, but just of critical contacts or of contacts in general. And you can later determine whether it's critical or not. And I think this is something I can't emphasize enough, because a lot of clients then say, but then we have the transparent employee because we know where they are, where they move, how long they have been anywhere. No, we can't. We can't say where this encounter has taken place. Was it in the cafeteria? Was it at the workstation? Was it near the bathrooms? We can't say. So I want you to take away that this is impossible with the system. Just let's have a quick look at what the tracing option looks like. So this is a screenshot from the exposure management app, of course, in a demo mode. It's not from a real system, but I think you see here. So we don't use the clear names of this person. This person now has come to the HR office, has said that he has to report a positive infection. Then you can type in his QR code and see right away who were the other employees that he had close contact with. And it's important to mention this filter option because you can here set the filters yourself. You can choose the data range that you're interested in. You can choose the distance, the maximum distance that those encounters took place. You can choose the duration of each encounter, but also the accumulated duration. And I think this is important, at least here in Germany. What the authorities recommend, or how they classify critical contacts, is that you have to have at least 15 minutes accumulated contact at a distance less than 1.50 meters to be classified as a first grade critical contact. And then you have a list of those people, but you can easily identify also their contacts, so the second level contacts to the positive infected person, positive tested person. And you can here identify their encounters, and then you could in theory go on and see who they were in touch with. Of course, those numbers are absolutely made up. I hope that if you use the system, you will never encounter 15 hours of critical contact, at least not with those filters that we have set. But it's just an example how you could easily identify the critical contacts within just a few minutes. And one more screenshot to have a look at the software. I mentioned that you can configure it to your needs. So here you see how you build basically the different alarm profiles or the different warning steps that I mentioned before, and how you set the always alarm zones and the no alarm zone. So it's just a simple configuration. You don't need to program anything here. And one other aspect of configurability is that you can create certain groups. So if you have people who have to work close together because it's impossible to move a certain part from one production step to another, we had that case, and they are protected by masks, you can say, all right, I don't want them to have the annoying alarm sound go off every time that they step close to one another. But of course, you do want their safe tags to go off once they have encounters with other people from other groups. So you can differentiate if it's somebody from their own group or from other groups. And I think that's very helpful. There's a lot of parameters you can choose from to make use of the system the way that it suits your needs. I mentioned before that that UWB has certain advantages over BLE. I want to spend some time on explaining the difference between ultra wideband and BLE. BLE has received a lot of attention because most national corona warning apps are based on BLE technology, simply because it is a technology that everybody already has with her or with him, simply by having a smartphone. But I think there was also a lot of criticism around the technology, and it's definitely, in our view, not the most suited technology for doing contact tracing. And that has mainly to do with two facts, and that's the way the technology measures the distance. So if we look at BLE, it's the signal strength that determines the distance. So the stronger the signal, the closer the technology says it is. But actually that might not be true, because there are lots of influences that might interfere with the signal strength. So for example, it transmits at the same frequency ranges as Wi-Fi and Zigbee as well. So it might be that the signal is not received very strongly, even though it's very close, simply because the surrounding environments influence it so much. And the other way around, that it's actually pretty far away, but there's nothing in the way, but so the signal is received very clearly, and then it determines a very close proximity, which is not true. How does ultra wideband do it? It's the time of flight measurement method. So the distance is calculated by the time of flight it takes for the signal to reach the other device. And that has the advantage that it's actually a yes or a no. So if the signal is received, it can calculate a measurement, it can calculate a distance. If it's not received, it just can't calculate a distance. So the calculation that it's being done is always very accurate, because there's no interference with other signals. Of course, UWB as a radio frequency technology also has limitations. So for example, a human body would block the signal, but then there's simply no calculation that it was a close contact. And normally we have a video I can show you later that if it's a face-to-face contact, it's impossible to block the signal for a longer time. Even if you put the hand across the sensor, there's always a way that it finds its way out, and then it can accurately calculate the distance that this contact has actually taken place. So what does that mean in terms of results? That's something that doesn't come from us. It's actually a study that somebody else has done for us, but it calculates the accuracy for the first and the second level contacts. And I think you can see that at the second level contact with UWB, you still have a 91% accuracy of getting them right. But with Bluetooth, it's only a 50% accuracy. So you have a lot of false positives with BLE and the other way around. And from customers we have who had some pilot projects with BLE in the summer, they know that the reliability and acceptance also among their employees for such a digital solution that's not very accurate wasn't very high. So they, after doing a pilot there, they have come back to us because if they invest in something, they want something that's reliable and works. 6 months has also allowed us to create some facts and figures around it from customers that were willing to share certain, let's say, KPIs with us. I think 2 interesting ones are the first one. So we have one client who actually did a test. They gave the safe tags to their employees, but they didn't configure any alarm signal. And then they were analyzing the data. And afterwards, they set certain alarm thresholds, and then they measured how the behavior changed. And it's actually amazing how they saw that the potentially critical contacts were reduced by 100%. Of course, people most of the time they do not have a good sense of what a meter in 50 years or whatever. This third one is the critical contacts to deal with the infections at your own companies. And we know from some of our customers who have come to us after they had the first cases that it took them up to 3 days to identify who was actually a person that had critical contact to the infected person, who they had to send to quarantine, who had to get tested. And with our system, it takes only about 25 minutes to see who was in touch with whom and who needs to get checked and who needs to get sent home. And I think those are just 2 simple figures. We could look at all of them in more detail, but I think pretty strong ones that justify an investment in a solution like ours. So if you've all looked at different solutions so far, I want to give you a brief summary of what we think are the most important benefits that we have over certain competitors. Of course, if you use UWB, you have the high precision. I think I've mentioned that, why it's better than Bluetooth in our view. We don't require any other infrastructure, so it's immediately ready to use. It's a plug-and-play system that once we send it to you, you just need certain onboarding calls from our project management, but then you can use it yourself, and basically you could, start using it, install it on your own. We've used this technology for quite some time, so it has proven its value. And also the hardware that we use it's not something that we've come up with in the past 6 months, but it's a sensor that we've used for 8 years already and just adapted it a little bit. For a lot of our clients, it's important that we don't rely on private smartphones, because especially in manufacturing environments, often this is a big issue that smartphones are not allowed. So there is no dependence on any smartphone. We have put a lot of emphasis on data protection. We have a lot of documents that we can share how we use the data, what data is collected, and what laws permit the usage of such data. And there's no interference with other technologies. So also if you use it in your production environment, there's no interference with Wi-Fi or BLE that you might use for other applications. I have just summarized here a little bit the different areas that we know our clients use it in. It's for very different settings. Actually, one of our major customers in the US, they produce video content for streaming services, and they use it on set. So to trace the contact chains of the people, of the actors, of everybody involved in a production. So we wouldn't have thought of a use for that. Of course, we use it also in sports leagues, but most of the clients we have here in Europe really use it in logistics and in production scenarios to protect the employees who can't stay at home, who have to come into work to keep the business running. But of course, it's up to you, and it works everywhere, even outside, as I think the shooting of the video content exemplifies. And with that, I'm actually done. I hope you could had the chance to get a good understanding of the product, and now I'm happy to answer more questions.
Well, thank you, Veronica. Very impressive presentation, and looks like a very powerful product. There's some questions did arrive. One of the questions was, do you really don't need any infrastructure that is already within the company, like a Wi-Fi infrastructure? So it's really standalone and a peer-to-peer communication. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, it depends a bit on the size of the system. Up until 240 safe tags, you can run it as a completely standalone system. We will provide you with everything, because then you can run the exposure management software on the laptop that we provide you with. After that, there needs to be an integration in the local network. So the exposure management would run, for example, on a virtual machine, where the data is centrally collected, because otherwise you would have different data silos and you can't say who was in touch with whom. But it's a minimum IT integration. I can share a document with you on that. So basically, once we deploy the software on this virtual machine, and then you have to establish a certain connectivity between those laptops, and that's it. But other than that, there's no infrastructure needed.
Okay, and another question: if someone asks if they want to start with a small trial package, do you have anything in place for that?
Yes, so we offer so-called test kits. That's 15 units, 15 safe tags that you can rent for 5 days and try it out, how it works. Does it really what you want it to do? Which I can recommend. We rent them for €2,000. Or what a lot of our bigger clients do is that they run pilot projects, smaller ones, in quantities like 30 units, and then they test it for 2 or 4 weeks. They buy it actually to see how the acceptance is also among their employees, how it fits into their overall concept of a safe environment.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think, as far as I can see, there are no other questions arriving at this moment. Should they arrive last minute, then we will get to those questions back to the person who asked them. So I think for now, Veronica, I want to thank you very much for presenting SafeZone to us and our audience. Thank you to all the people joining this webinar. I wish you all a very nice day. Hope to talk and see you soon. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Here's some information where you can reach directly to Veronica. You can also reach directly to me. Again, like I said, the video will be shared, so you can always come back to the screen again. And the invitation also mentions the email address of my colleague, kleine. So don't hesitate if you have any questions. We'll happy to answer them. So let's end the webinar with this. Thank you again, Veronica. Everyone in the office and at home, stay safe and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.